The millionaire stood tall in his glass office, his voice echoing cold across the room. "You're all fired." 10 cleaners stood frozen, their lives crumbling in an instant. To him, they were invisible, just another expense to cut. But what he didn't know was that one of those cleaners carried a kindness powerful enough to break through the walls of arrogance. Days later, when his young daughter, weak from cancer treatments, cried silently at her reflection in the mirror, it wasn't a doctor or her father's fortune that gave her hope. It was a black cleaner with a single wig in her hand who restored her dignity. And what happened next shocked the entire company and the millionaire himself. The announcement came like thunder crashing over a silent sky. Inside the towering glass headquarters of Brighthold Enterprises, workers froze as the sound of a single man's voice echoed across the marble floor. Effective immediately, the millionaire CEO declared, his tone as sharp as the shine on his cufflinks, "We are letting go of all 10 of our cleaning staff. Their services are no longer required in this company." The words fell heavy, but his face remained unmoved, polished, confident, unshaken. Around him whispers rippled, but no one dared to challenge his authority. To him, the cleaners were invisible, disposable shadows in uniforms erased with the stroke of a pen. Among those shadows was Amara Johnson. A black woman in her 40s, Amara had worked in silence for years. She scrubbed boardroom floors that echoed with power, dusted offices filled with ambition, and polished glass windows that overlooked a city of dreams she could never afford. She wasn't loud, she wasn't noticed, but she carried something none of the skyscrapers or luxury cars outside could buy, a heart that refused to stop caring. Her co-workers shifted uneasily, some close to tears. For many, the job was their last lifeline, the little that kept food on the table and children in school. Yet the millionaire, Mr. Henry Whitmore, gave no second thought. "Security will escort you out. Payroll will cover the rest of the month. That's all." And just like that, 10 lives were shattered. Amara clutched her cleaning cart, her knuckles pale against the steel handle. She thought of her small apartment, of rent due in less than a week, of her son who needed textbooks she still hadn't paid for. Her throat tightened, but she bowed her head. If there was one thing life had taught her, it was this: dignity isn't in the hands that push you down, but in how you stand back up. Still, none of them knew that fate was about to place Amara in a position where her quiet kindness would echo louder than the millionaire's arrogance. Because behind the glass walls of Whitmore's empire, another story was unfolding, one that money couldn't control. His daughter Lily was sick. The whispers in the office spoke of it carefully, almost fearfully. At just 11 years old, Lily Whitmore had been diagnosed with cancer. The treatments were brutal chemotherapy that left her weak, pale, and fighting through nights of unbearable pain. The illness had stripped her of her childhood, but what broke her most wasn't the hospital visits. It was the mirror. Each time Lily looked at her reflection, she saw less of the bright-eyed girl she used to be, and more of a stranger, a fragile frame, skin pale, and hair gone. She would touch her bare head, trembling, and turn away before the tears could fall. Her father tried to console her with toys, clothes, even custom-made dolls. But wealth couldn't cover the wound of a little girl who had lost the simple crown of her hair. And it was in this silent heartbreak that Amara stepped in. One evening, as she came to return her cleaning uniform, she noticed Lily sitting alone in the back seat of her father's car, her small head turned toward the tinted window. The girl's face was streaked with quiet tears. Amara's chest ached at the sight. She didn't see the daughter of a millionaire. She saw her own child. She saw pain that no money could silence. Amara hesitated, then reached into her bag. For years she had kept something deeply personal, a wig she had once worn herself after an illness left her hair thin. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't expensive, but it carried dignity, it carried memory. And in that moment, Amara knew who it truly belonged to. She tapped gently on the car door. Lily looked up, startled. The cleaner who had always passed by silently now stood with trembling hands holding out a box. "This is for you," Amara whispered softly. Inside lay the wig, soft, dark, and carefully brushed. Lily's eyes widened. Slowly, she reached out, her tiny fingers brushing against it. For the first time in months, her lips curved into a trembling smile. Amara gently lifted the wig and placed it on Lily's head. The transformation was instant, not just in appearance, but in spirit. Lily gasped when she saw her reflection in the glass. Her hands went to her head, touching the strands as tears filled her eyes. But this time, they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of recognition. She saw herself again. That night, Henry Whitmore came to the car and froze. His daughter was laughing softly, twirling strands of hair between her fingers. He stared at Amara, confusion flashing across his face. "What did you do?" he demanded. Amara straightened, her voice calm but firm. "I gave her back what you couldn't buy, dignity." The words struck like thunder. For the first time, the millionaire was speechless. His empire, his fortune, his arrogance, none of it mattered compared to the glow on his daughter's face. And though pride burned within him, he couldn't ignore the truth staring back. A cleaner, the very kind of person he had discarded, had given his daughter something priceless. What happened next shocked the entire company. Henry Whitmore stood frozen, his sharp businessman's mask cracking as he watched his daughter stroke her reflection with trembling joy. The sound of her laughter was fragile, but being alive struck him deeper than any corporate victory ever had. He had tried everything money could buy, yet it was this black woman, this cleaner he had just fired, who restored something he could not. He clenched his jaw, forcing composure. "You gave her this?" His voice was tight, nearly breaking. Amara held his gaze, her hands folded. "I gave her back a piece of herself." For a moment, silence stretched in the air. Henry's security guards hovered nearby, confused, waiting for an order. But the command never came. Instead, Henry turned back to his daughter. Lily's eyes shimmered, and for the first time in months, she leaned forward and hugged her father's chest. Her words were muffled, but they pierced him like glass. "Daddy, I feel pretty again." The titan of industry, the man who dismissed 10 lives without hesitation, suddenly felt smaller than ever. His throat tightened, his chest ached, and for the first time in years, tears burned at the corners of his eyes. The office staff found out quickly. Word spread through whispers at first more. The black cleaner gave the CEO's daughter a wig, and she smiled again. In an environment where most workers moved like machines under watchful eyes, this act of human kindness spread like wildfire. By the next morning, employees were sneaking glances at Amara as she arrived with her cart. But instead of mockery or dismissal, their eyes carried something else. Respect. Some even dared to smile at her. Yet Henry Whitmore was not a man used to being humbled. He paced his penthouse that night, staring out at the skyline, wrestling with a truth he didn't want to admit. His pride screamed to dismiss it as coincidence, to remind himself he was the one in control. But in the mirror of his daughter's laughter, all his arguments collapsed. The cleaner had done more for Lily in one gesture than he, with all his millions, could. And for the first time he wondered, have I been building an empire while failing the only kingdom that mattered to my family? But while Henry wrestled with his conscience, the city outside was beginning to talk. It started with a nurse from Lily's hospital who spotted her during a follow-up appointment. Lily had walked in with her new wig, smiling as she clutched Amara's hand. The nurse's eyes widened at the transformation and asked how. Lily, without hesitation, pointed at the black woman. "She gave me my hair back." From there, the story spread beyond the hospital walls. Staff whispered to reporters. A local paper caught the thread, and soon a headline appeared in bold black ink, "Millionaire's daughter finds confidence through cleaner's gift." The article didn't spare details. It mentioned Henry's layoffs, his wealth, and the sharp contrast of a black woman he discarded being the one to restore his daughter's spirit. By noon the next day, it wasn't just the office buzzing, it was the city. Henry's phone rang endlessly with board members, PR agents, investors, even rivals. Some congratulated him for the story of inspiration circling his name. Others scolded him for the optics, a ruthless employer painted as cold, his redemption coming not from his own actions, but from the compassion of someone he fired. Henry hated it, but deep inside, a quieter voice whispered that maybe this wasn't about him at all. Meanwhile, Amara went home that night exhausted, unaware of the storm brewing outside. She tucked her son into bed, kissed his forehead, and sat by the window with aching feet. To her, the wig wasn't a story. It was a simple act of kindness of one human to another. She had no idea that the world was now watching her. The next morning, when she walked into the company lobby, cameras were waiting. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Are you the cleaner who helped Lily Whitmore? How does it feel to do what the millionaire couldn't? Did you mean to shame your boss? Amara's heart pounded. She wasn't used to lights, to microphones thrust at her face. She simply raised her hand and said quietly, I just wanted to remind a little girl that she's still beautiful. That's all. The clip went viral. Within hours, millions had watched it online. Strangers left comments praising her compassion. Parents of children battling cancer wrote messages thanking her. Ordinary people, cleaners and workers who often felt invisible, held their heads higher seeing someone like them suddenly celebrated. But in the skyscraper office above, Henry Whitmore sat in silence. His empire was now under a light he couldn't control. His wealth no longer made him untouchable. And as his daughter skipped into the room, smiling with the wig on her head, he realized the question wasn't whether the world saw him as cold. The real question was whether he had been cold all along. The boardroom was unusually quiet. Men and women in sharp suits shifted uncomfortably in their chairs as Henry Whitmore sat at the head of the table, his fingers steepled under his chin. On the massive screen at the far end of the room, a paused news clip showed Amara's face tired but resolute, eyes calm as she said those words. I just wanted to remind a little girl that she's still beautiful. Henry pressed a button, replaying the line again. Her voice echoed in the sterile, glass-walled chamber. Some executives glanced down, others exchanged awkward glances. Finally, one board member cleared his throat. Henry, this situation has gone global. You're trending everywhere. The public doesn't see a billionaire fighting for his daughter. They see a ruthless man firing cleaners until one of them stepped in and did what you couldn't. Henry's jaw tightened. So you think I'm the villain in my own story? The man hesitated, then said softly, Sir, that's how it looks. The words stung, though Henry didn't show it. He dismissed the meeting quickly, but the echo of that sentence followed him all the way back to his office. The villain in my own story. He found Lily waiting for him there, spinning in front of the mirror with the wig Amara had given her. She grinned as her reflection twirled. Daddy, she said, can Amara come back? She's my favorite. Henry froze. The room, the city, the empire he built, none of it mattered in that instant. His daughter's request pierced straight through the armor of pride he wore every day. He sat heavily in his leather chair, suddenly exhausted. Meanwhile, Amara's life had changed overnight. Neighbors knocked on her door with small gifts, food, notes of encouragement, even envelopes with money tucked inside. Mothers whispered, God bless you, at the grocery store. For once, her son Emmanuel beamed with pride at school when classmates recognized his mother. But recognition came with a price. Not all were kind. Some accused her of doing it for fame. Others, mostly wealthy donors and Henry's loyalists, sneered that she had embarrassed her employer. At work, a few supervisors treated her with icy disdain, calling her the saint behind her back. Amara ignored the noise as best she could, but her heart worried for Emmanuel. Don't let this change how you walk, my son, she told him one evening as she tucked him in. We don't do good things for cameras or applause. We do them because it's right. Emmanuel nodded, but she saw the conflict in his young eyes. He was proud, but he also understood how fragile their lives were. Fame didn't pay rent. Recognition didn't erase bills. The breaking point came 1 week later. Henry stood in front of his office window as another article landed on his desk, this one not in the local press, but in an international business magazine. The headline cut sharper than any knife, The Millionaire Who Couldn't Buy His Daughter's Smile. He slammed the magazine shut. His ego screamed to fight back, to bury the narrative with money and PR. But when he turned, Lily was standing at the door. She looked smaller in her oversized sweater, but her eyes were steady. Daddy, she whispered, Amara is the reason I smile again. Why did you fire her? The question left him speechless. For the first time, Henry realized he had no answer, not one that would make sense to his daughter. That evening, Henry did something no one expected. He drove to Amara's neighborhood, not in his sleek limousine, not with bodyguards or tinted windows, but alone in a modest sedan he hadn't used in years. The streets were narrower here, the houses smaller, but alive with children playing and families gathered on porches. He spotted Amara sitting outside with Emmanuel, helping him with homework under a flickering streetlight. She looked up, startled, when the millionaire stepped out of the car in his tailored suit. The neighbors whispered, peeking from windows. Some pulled out phones. Henry cleared his throat, suddenly unsure how to stand without the power of his boardroom. "Amara," he began, "I came to say thank you." She blinked, setting her son's notebook aside. "Thank me? For what?" "For giving my daughter something I couldn't," he said quietly. His voice carried no arrogance, only wariness. "For seeing her as more than an illness. For seeing her when I didn't." Amara studied him, her eyes calm but sharp. "Mr. Whitmore, I didn't do it for you. I did it for Lily." Henry nodded, accepting the rebuke. Then, after a long pause, he added, "But maybe it's time I learned from you." That night was the first crack in Henry's armor, but it would not be the last, because soon the entire company and the whole city would see just how far one act of compassion could reach. Henry Whitmore had always been known as a man of iron discipline, iron will, iron heart. But after that night at Amara's modest home, the iron began to rust. He couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Lily twirling in front of the mirror, the wig flowing around her shoulders as she laughed. He kept hearing Amara's calm words, "I didn't do it for you. I did it for Lily." For days, Henry walked the corridors of his gleaming headquarters, distracted, his empire of glass and steel suddenly feeling hollow. Executives tiptoed around him, unsure of what storm was brewing. Finally, one Monday morning, Henry did something no one expected. He called an all-company meeting. The auditorium was packed. Cleaners, secretaries, accountants, engineers, and executives all sat in the same hall. The tension was thick. Most expected a lecture, maybe even more firings. But when Henry walked onto the stage, his usual armor of arrogance was missing. He looked tired. Humans. He tapped the microphone. His voice wavered at first, then grew steady. "I built this company with the belief that strength comes from control, from cutting weakness, from demanding perfection. That belief made me a millionaire." He paused, scanning the room. His gaze lingered at the back, where Amara sat among the cleaners in her simple uniform. "But I was wrong. I was blind. Strength isn't about power. It's about compassion. And the truth is, one of you, someone I thought disposable, taught me more about strength than I've learned in a lifetime." The room held its breath. Henry turned toward Amara. "This black woman," he said, his voice echoing, "gave my daughter back her smile. Something I, with all my money, with all my influence, could not. She reminded me that people matter more than profit. Dignity matters more than pride. And love is stronger than fear." The entire hall erupted in whispers. Cleaners sat straighter. Executives shifted uncomfortably. Some applauded tentatively, then louder until the entire hall shook with clapping. Henry raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "From today forward, no cleaner in this company will ever be treated as expendable. You are not invisible. You are not beneath anyone. You are the backbone of this place." He turned back to Amara. "Amara, if you'll allow it, I'd like you to return not as a cleaner, but as the new head of staff well-being. You'll have the authority to ensure every worker here is treated with dignity. No one will ever feel invisible again." The hall exploded. Gasps, cheers, tears. Cleaners hugged each other. Executives whispered in disbelief. Amara sat frozen, her eyes wide. Emmanuel, sitting beside her, squeezed her hand with pride. Slowly, Amara stood. The room hushed. Her voice was calm but strong. "Mr. Whitmore, I never asked for recognition, but if my story reminds even one person to treat another with dignity, then it was worth it. I accept." The applause that followed shook the entire building. From that day forward, the company changed. Cleaners were given fair wages and benefits. Henry's executives were forced to shadow them for a day each year to understand their value. A new culture was born, one rooted not in fear, but in respect. But the most powerful change wasn't in the company. It was in Henry himself. At home, Lily flourished. She grew stronger, her laughter returning like sunlight after a storm. She invited Amara and Emmanuel often, and their bond grew like family. Henry would sometimes catch himself just watching Amara talk with Lily, humbled that a black woman he once dismissed had become the very person who saved his daughter's spirit. Months later, at a charity gala, Henry stood on stage with Lily by his side. Cameras flashed, the city's elite watching closely. But Henry didn't speak about profits or deals. Instead, he told the world about Amara, about compassion, about the lesson he had learned the hard way. And as Lily twirled in her wig, smiling at the cameras, the audience rose in a standing ovation, not for the millionaire, but for the black cleaner whose act of love had rewritten an empire. Sometimes the strongest hands are not the ones that build skyscrapers, but the ones that lift others when they fall. Sometimes the greatest wealth is not found in bank accounts, but in kindness that outlives us. Amara was just a cleaner, but with one wig she gave a little girl back her crown and reminded a powerful man what it truly means to be human. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Colorless Voices, where every story reminds us dignity has no color and kindness has no rank.